What's up, guys? Streaming some 200 and out today. Okay. Gonna be folding here. 10-9 suited's not that great. See how this goes. C betting here with ace 10, folding the 10-3 offsuit. So yeah, pretty much second time streaming. Haven't really done much streaming, but thought I'd give it a try. Right. This is a pretty small bet. I'm gonna float it with the backdoor flush draw and backdoor straight draw. And I mean, this hand could show down, so I think checking is alright. Like it wins occasionally, but not too often. Still a bit too strong to go for a bluff with. This will probably be a check with second pair. So yeah, you just had 4-3, which is a reasonable c-bet. Gonna be checking this twice to bet the river for value. Gonna go for the check raise here. Don't mind a fold or a call. And ace 5 just gonna be calling. Going for some value on the turn. River, I think just picking a small size would do pretty well. I mean, if we bet any bigger, yeah, we sometimes run into a stronger hand. Whoa, it's a pretty big shove. Not gonna be calling tens. So it should be a nice and quiet stream. If you have any like strategic questions or anything, feel free to ask in chat. Delay's like pretty small, so definitely if you're interested in learning something, might be able to help here. Gonna be free betting with the 5-4 suited. It's a bit like worse when there's two people behind, but these guys aren't gonna like overcall a lot, so I'm usually just getting heads up with this guy. And pretty dry board texture, so just gonna be betting small. Calling with the 9-8. Just trying to get some ace highs to fold, some king highs to fold, and then on the river I think we can go for a bluff here just to fold out hands like 8s and 9s. So he just makes a really ridiculous float, but we did bet quite small. I think he should be betting the river when he hits a straight, but definitely fine line by him. 9-8 is one of my weaker nines, so I'll tend to check that back multi-way and then start betting on the turn. And definitely value betting the river, just gonna go all in. It's unlikely we get called though, because I don't think people are really bluff catching a 7 too often. I mean, they might, but usually when they check hold the turn, it's some kind of draw. Just gonna reload on this table. Facing free bet with aces. He's pretty short stack, so we don't really have to make it too big. Just check calling here. Not too many hands we want to check raise with. And gonna go for the river bluff. In terms of delay, it's like 20 seconds-ish, maybe a bit longer. So, just a heads up. Folding a6. Against min raise, calling king 4. And folding the flop. This is the main game I play. I'll add some reg tables in when I'm not streaming usually, so usually around 6 tables. including the zone tables, and yeah, they're pretty profitable. I'd say like you don't need to be that good to beat these games. You just have to have a solid game plan and strategy, and then you go for exploits here and there. It's interesting because you're playing in an anonymous game, so you can make a lot of plays that you probably wouldn't be able to get away with if you had a screen name attached to you. I'm from Australia, which is why I'm playing on Ignition, of course. Unfortunately, you can't play on Stars, but this is still really good. I prefer these games over Stars in terms of like softness. As I mentioned, delay I believe is like 20 seconds, so. Yeah, in terms of exploits, like there's universal exploits that you can take in certain lines that are available over pretty much every game on every site, but like the deviation to like the exploitability of each pull is a little bit different. So examples would be like 50 an hour defending a little bit late, like a bit tight on like pre-flop, and then making them fold a bit less post. Yeah, I'm not too concerned with people sniping me, because like if you're playing 200 zone and trying to snipe me, like you're not gonna get that many hands. So even if you snipe me, you're probably losing win rate just by trying to watch my stream for the specific times that I do run into a hand with you, and like you're not even gonna know that because it's like anonymous. So yeah, good luck with your time bank if you're trying to snipe me. Like I'd probably run a bit more of a delay if I was playing a tournament, for example, but like these kind of games are just very hard to snipe, and you're barely getting any win rate against me anyway if you do. River is a check here to showdown. So yeah, like if you think about it in terms of like a game theory perspective, on one hand you can try and snipe me to gain like a bit of EV every like 1,000 hands that you might eventually run into me and realize that I'm in the same hand as you, and then in exchange for that you lose all the concentration that you have because you're forced to watch my stream, which just lowers your win rate. Like what I would do here is, because like I am streaming, I'm like just in the rare chance I get sniped, I'm going to minimize that by basically just sitting out whenever I have more than like 200 big blinds. Six four is, it's like really marginal. I'd say it's like the worst hand I defend, or like one of them anyway. But against a min raise, you can probably make that profitable. So far not really anything interesting in terms of hands, but that's completely fine. Don't play to get action, just play to get money. Ace-6 suited here, I usually fold. It's probably the only suited ace, well, Ace-6 and Ace-2 I'll fold to an open, and then I'll free bet some of the other ones. Just doesn't perform too well. So flop a flush here, phase a donk rate, well, definitely raising here against a donk bet. He pretty much just instantly caps his range, so I'd say he could have some weak pairs, he can have some flushes, like low flushes for example, and occasionally like A6 of clubs, but basically we can almost certainly treat this hand like the nuts and just try to get stacks in by the river. Folding the Ace-8 here, multi-way with the paired board and the king. Like, it's a very marginal call with a player behind. But heads up, it's probably a call with a top pair. Just gonna try and show this down. We do have a gut shot, but I'd still be folding to that. And on the river, well, we just pray to show down and chop. Courses on Raise Your Edge. Well, I don't have any courses of my own, but then CB789 basically owns the site and has a tournament masterclass there. It's probably the best tournament course you can get. Pretty much covers like everything you need to know about tournaments. And then there's the Elite Cash Game course. Well, there's the elementary, which is for beginners, and then I think they're working on a more advanced one for live cash games at the moment. I personally am not making any of the courses. I am more just someone on the Discord replying to stuff and also doing some private coaching. And at the moment I don't really plan on doing any courses, but that can be something I might do in the future. I just don't think courses are like the most like effective way for me to like help people because of how general we have to be, and I'd rather focus on helping people who are already at like a particular level in terms of their skill. So I focus more on working with people who are gonna be playing like 50 NL and 100 NL. And a lot of the work I do there will be on solvers, so how to use PO Solver to run simulations and whatnot, and also how to, well, just database reviews as well. I'm gonna be barreling here. I mean, we have to be slightly worried about King Queen, but that's not a large part of his range. He's still gonna have Ace Queen a whole bunch, as well as some suited aces. Queen 2 is going to be a fold. It's probably the only queen I fold there against that size. And folding the 10-9 there. Get some action again with aces. So as usual, just going to be playing this as a 4-bet. Try and get the money in pre. And up against Ace King, and he's drawing dead now. So I pick up a gut shot here, and I also have the backdoor nut flush blocker, so I'm going to be barreling this and then barreling on a club, or if I hit a straight. And just going to sit out here because I'm above 200 BB. Flop's going to be a check with the King Queen. I'm actually mostly playing this spot as a check multi-way. There's just not too many hands that we want to be betting, apart from like some 2 pairs, some sets, and some draws. So check calling the turn, and river just trying to show down and then probably folding to a river bet. On 9 deuce, I don't really like playing this in a limped pot, and the way people play small blind in general is pretty weak, so I think ISOing this is, or just raising versus the limp is pretty good. Here, this is a hand I usually will incorporate as part of my check raising strategy exploitatively due to how people are playing this board texture. They're not floating enough overcards. So hands like Jack 10 with a backdoor flush draw might be called at a certain frequency and then they're getting folded. But once I do get a call from him, I'm just giving up, expecting his range to be quite pair heavy. pre-flop, just checking here. Pretty decent board for him. And same here. So like a lot of people have a tendency to see bet those out of position just because they raised pre-flop, but generally not that great of an idea to be c-betting aggressively out of position unless you're in small blind versus big blind where the ranges are a lot wider. This hand I'll usually play as a check back and then bluff either turn or river. When I'm open raising hands like ace-10 under the gun here, I'm usually paying attention to the stack sizes behind me. So if there's someone short stacked in the big blind, it's more likely they're a fish. So I try to increase my frequencies a little bit. People are just never really gonna notice that because you're playing anonymous, so you can get away with increasing your frequency when it's likely someone's more of a fish than a regular player. Betting this small. Generally when people check this kind of board texture, they're gonna overfold. Experienced a bit of lag there, so it might just be my internet. Alright, freeze, just folding. I'm going to be checking this, especially on the monotone board. So one of the main differences between being in and out of position that kind of forces us to play a bit more conservative, since we can always face a bet out of position when we check, whereas when we're in position and face a check, we can always check back and see the turn. So here with the open ender against half pot, I'm calling. And going to be checking the turn. No reason to go for a lead here. In terms of what to do now, I think we're not perceived to have too many 4x in our range, and he's going to have a lot of overpairs and draws as well that aren't bet folding, so just going for max value there before a dangerous looking river card comes. So multi-way, generally being a bit more careful. With my second pairs, I'm only really calling like the best ones. So ace 10, king 10, and folding some of the weaker ones. Because with ace 10 and king 10, you at least have an overcard, so you can improve. Just continuing to check call here. And going for the free bet with eights. Pretty strong board for both ranges. I'd say that people tend to like under full bet this spot, so they'll have a bit more queens and jacks there. On the river, I'm gonna go for two small bets. We're perceived to have a lot of ace king in our check back range, and I'm pretty much just targeting like two pair combinations that he can have. So here, pretty clear free bet with aces. And just going for the C bet. Typically, I don't think we get free streets with this kind of hand, so I like to just overbet the turn here and then check back on a bunch of different river cards. And what this does is it basically manipulates the range a bit more. So a lot of people are just not going to be aware of how they're going to control their frequencies in terms of splitting between check call and check raising all in. So they'll lean towards just playing their value hands fast versus that sizing, and then when they call, they're quite draw heavy or capped. Just folding, no reason to get out of line. Just gonna fold. I mean, it's a small bet. You could treat it like a check, but there's another player behind, which makes it a bit worse. I'm checking some of these ace X with a heart type hands back on the turn and basically just betting the river with them. And this basically just gives me run out coverage, and also the functionality of the turn bet is a bit worse when our kick is weak, so I think the best option there is just to play it as a check on the turn. Against this stack size, which is on the shorter side, I'm basically 4-bet shoving most of my pairs rather than playing them as a call. And we actually get pretty lucky there against queens. But basically his 3-bet range is gonna consist of enough overcards for us to incorporate some 4-bet shoves with some low pairs. So here, just getting it in with kings. Pretty standard. I'm getting some nice hands now. Sometimes when I play a session I'll just be like completely card dead, but that's okay. Just eventually the card distribution evens out. So just focusing whenever I'm playing on just making the best decisions and avoiding being results oriented. So we've hit the 200 BB mark, and I'm gonna reset the table. Okay, Ignition typically does like to glitch out, but it's been good to me today. sometimes I have to try like multiple times on this site to get the table up, and then it just gets stuck on 97%. Okay. So here I double barreled, and now I'm going to just give up. Okay, face a strange donk bet, but I'm just folding. I reset once I hit 200 big blinds or more, because I'm trying to reduce the impact of variance, and basically it really allows me to play a bit more consistently, because I know my edge is going to be like, it's going to be high, sure, at 200 BB, but it's not worth the potential damage that I can experience to my mental game over a long period of time. Because like when you get stacked for 200 BB, it just, unless you have really solid mental game, you're gonna experience a decrease in like your ability to play over that session. You might lose some concentration, you might play worse, you might tilt, and I just want to like basically completely avoid that situation, because I know like in my past, like I've had some triggers where my worst sessions were coming from a place where I was basically just playing very deep, like maybe like 200, 300 BB deep, and then I lose a pot, and then you can usually just like feel like a sudden decrease in your game, and that kind of either forces me to sit out, or like, well, in the past, like I've lost like quite a lot of binds in a row after that happened. So I just try to avoid that situation, and it really helps me maintain like stability in my mental game. Plus, like in the zone pool, you don't really have much of a time bank, so you want to avoid having too many tough decisions with so little time. So yeah, ultimately it's a trade-off between like, okay, potentially increased win rate and potentially unstable gameplay as a result of tilt and increased variance. So it's kind of a choice of like, okay, are you able to handle it or not? And if you don't think you can handle it, just avoid it. Here I'm betting really small to get called by a queen or even a hand like jacks, because I think when he checks twice he'll rarely have an ace. So just a very thin value bet there in that kind of pot. We can check what he called with. He called with tens, which I think is very ambitious. I think when I bet there I can have a bunch of queen x as well. So I just usually fold this spot and anticipate that people are under bluffing with that size. But when I play against other people, I notice that they just don't have the discipline to actually like fold, which incentivizes me to actually use that bet sizing, even though I know I'm like never bluffing there. He checks back. I'm gonna start betting for value against any draws that he can have, as well as some 9x. Just betting half pot twice. He'll occasionally check back a hand with a queen in it, but usually it's going to be a hand like queen jack or queen 10, and I have two jacks in my hand. Once he calls turn and jams river, this line is basically, over my database analysis, like very rarely bluffed. So I just assume that he has a 2 like trips there every time. That doesn't make our bet bad or anything, it just means that we ran into the top of his range. So here with the king 10, I'm gonna float with the backdoor flush draw and straight draw. On this board, after free betting and facing a donk, I'm just gonna lean towards folding. I mean, it's a bit of a volatile line, but it's also difficult to find bluffs that don't have a ton of equity against us. So here I'm just check jamming for value. I don't really expect him to fold anything significant. Like maybe if he just has like ace jack or something. So you can see like the backdoor flush draw being at work there. Usually when you hit that type of hand, you're gonna have a lot more implied odds than, let's say, if the heart flush comes. But that said, you have less equity initially on the flop, so that's why you don't want to be check calling. I mean, you don't want to be check raising that type of hand, because you don't want to start building the pot. But yeah, keeping that hand in your check call range will give you decent run out coverage. Typically sizing up on this board with this type of hand. The 10 high boards and lower generally require you to bet a little bit of a larger size unless the board's connected, since they can profitably float pretty wide if you don't. And then obviously when a overcard to the 10 comes, you're going to be barreling the king jack very often. Going for the raise here with 9s. checking both hands on the flop. Ace-8 typically checking down to the river and bluffing to fold out hands like Ace-Jack, and also some like weak pairs. Plus a lot of our 10x is going to play this way as well, so it helps us find some bluffs. And here, just check folding. Can kind of go both ways here. I don't mind calling here. Now we pick up a flush draw on a board that neither player will connect with too often, so we can actually even check call here, but I do like to just go for the bet and build the pot for when we make the nuts. Since we'll usually get calls from worse flush draws anyway, and then we get additional value in the river. Generally when I'm re-raising pre-flop, it's neither value nor bluff. It's just that that hand would prefer to take one, like an aggressive action over a passive action. Because, well, I mean, if you have aces, obviously you want to get the money in, but like when you have like a middling kind of mergey hand that can go both ways, you're kind of just deciding which action to take based on the expectation of that action anyway. And usually with a hand like jacks, you don't actually want to see the flop, since there are hands that you'd benefit from folding out. Like the only hands that actually want action pre-flop a lot of the time once you free bet someone are like aces, kings, and queens. Like even with ace king, you don't mind just taking it down pre-flop. Hopefully that kind of answers your question. This board I'm going to be checking very frequently on, since it's quite good for the big blind in terms of how many nut combinations he has, and just folding to the bet on the turn. So this hand I usually include in my full bet bluffing range. get snap 5 bet, so I'm just folding it. I think the turn bet here with Jack 10's okay, given how much equity denial we can get. We can get called by some worse hands as well, and then we can check back a lot of rivers. Well, we can check a lot of rivers and then either bluff catch or fold, depending on the run out. Nine's calling 3-bet with. And this board texture, I'm just going to be folding against that sizing. If he bets like 1/3 pot, then I'd call. Just going for the small bet here to basically fold out some of his ace highs and check folding the turn. The like small flop C bets in a 3-bet pot typically work pretty well. So you can probably get away with just betting your entire range for that sizing against unknowns. People haven't really studied how wide they're meant to actually defend. And just going for the bet check, bet bluff. I'm gonna go for small bet here because people's check back ranges are constructed and consisting of a range of something like 8s through kings pretty often. So I don't want to bet extremely large and get those to fold and isolate myself against a stronger hand. Not that too many of those are possible. pretty clear fold here. So generally, if you're like watching the stream right now, if and you're trying to learn poker, I guess the main thing I would be thinking of is I'd be trying to take down anything that you found and insightful in any way, and also just like asking questions, which really helps. Here, just check folding. Actually, this size we probably have to call, given we have a backdoor flush draw. But now we're folding the turn. So yeah, been playing for about an hour, up like 2 binds, so doing pretty good. Probably try and stream for another hour, depends how I feel. Right now I'm pretty focused, which is a good state to be in when you're playing. I find usually after around like half an hour of playing, I get into a bit of a flow state. The connectivity of the board is a little bit different. So with 764, there's a bunch more combinations of sets possible and straight draws possible. That hand would just be a fold. Don't mind including some overbets here with these type of hands. So this is a bit of a hotspot exploit. I'm check raising here because I blocked some of his top pair combinations, and I know that this board is meant to be c-bet at a really high frequency and defended pretty wide versus check raise. Queen free, once this guy overcalls, I'm just gonna fold. Against 2.5x and an overcall, I would play that hand, but against 3x, I'm folding. It's just a matter of the playability of that hand changing quite a bit when the ranges look a bit different. Against min raise in this kind of pot, it's a call. We have a backdoor straight draw, we have an overcard, and we have a backdoor flush draw, so can't really be folding versus min raise. I'm not sure what he's doing here. I think this is a value shove. I'd just expect like a nut hand to just bet larger. So either he's just bluffing really randomly, or he has like a medium strength hand that's trying to go for thin value. So ace queen off, calling. Calling here with ace queen with the diamond, and folding to a turn bet. Okay, so gonna read that question now. Let's say button opened and you free bet from the small blind with queens. If the board was 4-8-9 two-tone, are you checking there? If you did and he bet, are you just check calling or check raise? It actually depends on the size that he's picking. If I decide to actually check there. Although on the 9-8 full board I'm going to be betting very aggressively small blind versus button, since it's a pretty strong board for the small blind. So I'm not checking too frequently on that board. And if I check, I'm probably not using queens, I'm more using aces and kings, and those are more likely to be in the check call range. And using aces and kings over queens makes a lot of sense, just because those hands need way less protection since there are less overcards possible. So in that nines hand, I'm folding my ace jack since I'll have hands like ace queen and ace king to continue check calling with versus sizing, as well as a bunch of pairs. Here, once we face an overcall, I would 4-bet if this guy was deeper stacked, but I'm just gonna fold because this hand is not gonna realize very well. I think the overcalling range is quite strong here, and also stronger because of this short stack, since this guy will feel a bit more inclined to trap and then induce that guy to go with a 4-bet shove. So I don't want to be c-betting there on a 2 Broadway board with an under pair, so I'm just playing it as a check fold. In terms of like constructing free bet pot ranges in relation to elasticity, basically you'll probably want to run everything through Equilab and look at how their range composition looks like. Calling ace king versus a donk bet, kind of a strange size, and then folding on this turn. So yeah, what I mean by like range construction is how the type of draws that are possible. So are gut shots possible, or are open-ended straight draws possible, or are flush draws possible? So when typically there's a board texture with higher equity draws, you can generally size up a bit more, since those hands are inelastic to a larger sizing. And then when the board is a bit drier and there's no like immediately like high equity draws, then you would size down. So I guess like to give you an example, on like a 10-9-5 board, you would probably want to, as the out of position player, you'd probably want to use a pot-sized flop c-bet at some frequency, more so than a 1/3 pot c-bet. Probably actually want to be doing a lot of checking on this board, but I still think people play the monotone boards quite terribly, so we can get away with just betting. I think this was a bit large, but it's okay. And just going for the small flop c-bet. I'm bluffing with this combo since it doesn't block the flush draw. This board should have been a bet, and then facing this sizing, I'm probably just gonna fold because I don't think people are going to have any idea what they're supposed to bluff. Ace Jack there can also be played as a flat pre-flop, but generally I find that people don't call 4-bets enough, so it makes it a little bit better to 4-bet that type of hand. Especially when they pick a larger sizing, since there's a bit more dead money. Six-five off against that stack will likely be a defend. And then check folding this board. Yeah, the bluff there isn't really about courage, it's more just understanding like what kind of hands you want to choose as bluffs and then just playing and following your strategy. Here we could try to bluff, but I think he's pretty ace heavy. And I don't think he's folding like 9. I mean, he'll fold some 9s through like 10s, but he doesn't have too many of them. Eventually, like when you've played and you've got experience, you don't really think too emotionally about spots. That is, if you have like the correct bankroll management, like you would just be able to go for the bluffs. Same with like the hero calling. But generally, hero calling is not a good idea because people don't actually bluff too often. Limped pot, so calling once with the ace high. Since ranges are going to be pretty wide there. And then I'm just folding to the second barrel. Like ultimately when you get better as a player, you're no longer like just randomly bluffing. You actually think about whether the bluff will be profitable based on what your opponent's ranges will look like, and then you make the bluff. Because if you just try to bluff randomly, you're probably going to lose money. Okay, so we got another question. Against a free bet from an in-position player, once you've opened from early position, I'm usually going to use Queen 10 suited. Well, I'm usually going to fold Queen 10 suited, and then King 10 suited is usually going to be a 4-bet bluff. So I wouldn't play those as a call. And if you're against weaker players, then I'd generally just fold them. Like Jack 10 suited, for example, would just be folded most of the time unless they made it like small. And if blinds 3-bet, then again I'm using some of those as a 4-bet, but then they can start to be played as a call as well. So like Jack 10 suited, you could call versus a blinds 3-bet, but generally try to avoid calling 3-bets out of position. It's like the main way that people burn money. And so if you wanted to like stick to one strategy, I would stick to a tighter strategy when it comes to facing free bets out of position. So like here with King Jack offsuit, this is just a snap fold. Like even if he makes a small, like the worst hand I'm continuing there with is King Queen offsuit, Ace Jack offsuit. And Ace Jack offsuit might even just prefer to fold bet as well. Since again, like, just don't want to be playing that type of hand out of position too often. King Queen off against UTG, just a fold from the small blind. Turn will need to be checking since the queen now completes the straight, and I'm just going to be folding mainly because I think the types of hands that check back there are going to be like ace queen type hands or second pair with the queen. So generally hard for people to bluff there. I think we can kind of go both ways here between folding or calling or even raising. I like the raise here because this guy's already capped. This guy led into us, so his range is also somewhat capped. Since a lot of people are going to be checking strong hands in that spot. Here I'm barreling the turn and then I'm giving up without a diamond. I will be using this as one of my bluffs on a 4 diamond river though. Since we don't actually block any pairs with this hand. And then our diamond combinations of this King Jack offsuit hand will have made a flush, so we'd be value betting those. Against 3x, this is a fold. Don't want to be calling. There's going to be action killers on this kind of board when the turn comes an overcard, or if it comes 4 straight. So I just want to build the pot. So generally when I'm thinking about bluffing, I think about what hands my range has that can support the bluff, so like what value hands I have in a situation, and also I'm thinking about what my opponent's range looks like in terms of their range composition to decide upon a sizing that I want to use. So if their range is consisting of a lot of one pair hands on the river, then it's likely that I'm going to use a size to fold those out, whereas if they're consisting of more top pair combinations, then what I'll want to do is actually bet a much larger size to get them to fold. Although I generally wouldn't recommend trying to get people to fold top pair, but there are like specific situations where that might make some sense. We get snap min raised on the river. This is just very rarely a bluff. because no one's really preempting to insta bluff you in that spot, so they're trying to induce a snap call from you. I don't think we're beating any value hands there when he min raises, so I'm folding. Might seem like theory wise you're probably supposed to call because of how small he made it, but from general perceived range awareness, like, this is not a spot where someone's just gonna challenge you with a bluff. Okay, let's check what I did. I actually checked the flop, which is probably just a misclick because I was focusing on the other spot. But yeah, once I bet turn and I choose that sizing on the river, I'm not a fan of calling there, even if he makes us small. You're just gonna run into a flush a lot of the time. So just betting for value against this. Basically you can just treat this as a check. I'd say this range is somewhat capped, but then again he can have some ace of spade type hands as well. Generally gonna just shove for value though. This board we're betting small. We can also be perceived to have a few bluffs there. I think this is a fold versus this sizing. We're gonna have enough 2-pair combinations there to bluff catch with, and I don't think he's value betting worse for that sizing. Hey, welcome to the stream. Been going for a solid hour and a half. Made a few buy-ins. This is No Limit Hold'em. A cash game. Zone poker is a format where if you fold your hand you get a new one immediately and you don't have to watch the rest of the other hand play out. Means you get way more hands per hour. Plus the amount of time you have per decision's a bit lower than like the usual tables. So you get like 15 seconds per decision. And if you time out, your hand gets folded. So we don't get action with aces here, but we'll see what happens with tens. Also get folds. Six eight suited, you could consider opening from the cutoff, but I'm usually just folding that hand. I think it's actually on the marginal side, despite what a lot of people think about playing the cutoff. So yeah, here, typical spot for a free bet, since this hand's a little bit too weak to call. Why don't I play tournaments? Well, I actually used to play tournaments and then I switched to cash games. I find that for my particular skill level, I'm able to make more playing cash games, although I'd say most people probably make more playing tournaments. Plus, there's the time investment, where you're kind of forced to play 8-hour sessions and longer. So the lifestyle's a little bit worse for playing tournaments, and with cash games you can kind of just sit out whenever you feel like. So if you get tilted, then you can sit out, whereas in the tournament you just have to keep playing. Or if you get tired, you can take a break. So I find I'm able to play like much better poker on average when I'm playing cash games. I do occasionally throw in a tournament here and there, but yeah. I just love the cash game lifestyle a lot better. Also, like, kind of allows me to do a lot more stuff that I'm interested in, so I can focus a bit more on like producing a bit of video content. I can work on my crypto trading and my forex trading. So I kind of split up my day a bit more. Actually just gonna fold this. But yeah, like cash games are a lot more difficult than tournaments in terms of the skill of the players in them. Like most tournament players, when they go and play cash, aren't beating the games, since it just requires a different skill set. Although, I mean, I started out playing sit and goes and then basically grinded them for like a year, then moved to tournaments. and then now I'm playing cash. And I initially started playing cash at like 2NL micro stakes, like $2, trying to play like 16 tables on PokerStars, and then I realized that wasn't the way to go about it. So I started working on my game, and I got coaching. So yeah, just full betting ace jack here when he picks the largest sizing, and get a fold. In terms of like coaching versus training sites, I'd say like personalized coaching has a lot more value than training sites do, because training sites can't really help you find your leaks and figure out what's actually relevant for you to be studying, so you end up just watching random videos about how to overbet the river when you should be working on something else. Although like stuff like Upswing starts to structure things a bit more so that you can like work through systematically, but a lot of the time like your win rate's just going to be maximized by actually getting someone to look at your game and then figuring out like what will help your win rate the most by finding like your biggest leaks. So I'd say like even at like 25 NL, like you should probably look for someone to coach you if you know that they're credible and you can afford it. Or like alternatively, the other thing you could do is set up a study group or talk to players that are slightly better than you and work through it that way. So like ultimately it's kind of just more like how quickly do you want to grow as a player, and once you have answer that question, you'll figure out whether you want to actually spend some extra money to basically what that does. It might hurt your gains in the short term financially. For example, if you're doing a coaching for profits type of program, which I did, and I guess you sacrifice some short-term winnings, but then you develop your skill a lot better, and then over the long term you'll probably make more money back. For me, I usually ask people to give me a minimum of 10 to 15,000 hands. Usually I prefer 30 for a more accurate estimate of how they're playing. But I think you can figure out a lot of stuff, especially from micro stakes plays, from even a 10k hand sample, since the leaks are a lot more glaring and stand out a lot. Whereas if when I coach people who are a bit better, you need to actually dig for some of the leaks. Going for the bluff here. Very easy bluff when you have 5 high, since you fold out a lot of better hands. One more thing I'll probably add to the training site versus regular coaching thing is you want to find out how you learn as a person, and then basically search for content that suits and fits that type of learning. So some people learn better by reading books, some people learn pretty well watching videos, some people learn by just playing the game and getting feedback from how they played, which is in the form of a hand review or a live sweat. And basically once you figure out how you learn, that's when you can start accelerating your growth, because a lot of the time people just go, okay, this resource is available to me, I'm gonna use it. And instead of looking for types of resources that actually allow them to process and learn information a lot better. Here we can both call or check raise. I think calling is just fine against the small sizing. I'd rather check raise something with a bit more equity. I think river's just a check. So typically deep stacked in these kind of spots, I'm gonna be checking a lot out of position, and then when they check back, I'm going to be using larger overbet sizes on certain turn cards. So that turn, for example, gives me a lot of top pair combinations like ace-king and king-queen. So I want to be overbetting there, and then I'll also turn some other hands into bluffs. And that just puts their range in a lot of pressure, because when they check back they do have a lot of medium strength holdings. Against a shorter stack, I'm just playing this as a check call. If he was a bit deeper, we can start using this as a check raise occasionally. And with the king high flush, we're going to be calling twice. We do fold some of our flushes, but this isn't going to be one of them. So a pretty interesting play by him with fives. I would probably lean to... I think double barreling there is actually okay. Let's just look at the board texture again. I probably wouldn't pick such a large size on the flop. But like when the ace does come, he should actually be betting quite large. And basically getting us to fold some 8x, some 10x. pretty large sizing. Just betting half pot on this turn when he checks. He can have some a6 of spade type hands, and then he can have rivet, or he could have turned an 8 some of the time, so I'm just trying to get value from those. Nice, made some quads. Alright, we are gonna be slow playing here. Bad river for us unless he hit an ace. But we're just gonna ship it and pray he had something that can call. Which he does. So we'll take a quick look at what he had. Very strange line. Picking some small sizings there. So this is how you get owned when you see bet out of position. He just overvalued his hand a lot. Like, he should probably be checking the river with this hand, because even if when he hits the ace, he's not really getting called by worse. Absolutely wrecked. I think multi-way this is a fold with a player behind, but if we're on the if we're in position, we're probably calling king jack here. Generally I play ace-10 offsuit here as a free bet. I think we want to avoid having additional callers when we have this type of hand, and the blockers make it a pretty reasonable hand to free bet. So if I had ace-10 suited, I'd probably flat that, but ace-10 off, I'm going for a free bet. Probably gonna wrap it up after we hit the big blind. Gonna go for some exercise. I think I'm gonna continue doing a bit more of this streaming thing. I mean, it can get a bit boring when you're playing by yourself, and it's nice to get some interaction going. could be a big pot with this hand. So we'll just be check calling the flop here and check calling the turn. And then on the river we are gonna go for an overbet. So generally when you're deeper there, you want to use some big sizes, especially when your opponent's range is somewhat capped. So when he checks back the turn there, he rarely has a hand better than King Queen. And then we have a ton of flush draws that we can have. We have some straight draws that we might want to bluff with. So just want to go for a really large sizing and then include a lot of bluffs and value hands there. Right. See you guys later.